polls have closed in the Bayou State. The heated Senate race between Democrat incumbent Mary Landrieu and Republican challenger Susie Terrell, a sometimes vicious battle. Both candidates have pulled all the stops but not a single punch as they battle for the last remaining Senate seat. In a state where the politics are as colorful as its famed Mardi Gras parades, the voters will decide who wins the Louisiana showdown. And good evening from Washington and the house that Britt built. I'm Shepard Smith. As you decide 2002, the final decision to be made this night. From Chalmette to Sunshine, New Orleans to Baton Rouge, the last ballots are being cast right now. A U.S. Senator about to be elected. But the vote in Louisiana is about much more than the lone Senate seat up for grabs. For Democrats, it's an opportunity really to stop the bleeding, to make claim that the Bush mandate is anything but. And for the GOP, an opportunity to increase their majority in the Senate, to place the first Republican from Louisiana in the Senate since Reconstruction. It's been just over a month since Republicans took control of the Senate in the midterm elections, gaining a majority of 51 seats. Democrats claim 47, and then there's Jim Jeffords of Vermont, the lone independent. Tonight, either Democrat Mary Landrieu, the incumbent, or Republican Susie Terrell will make the Senate complete. And right now, it's a dead heat. And this night could prove to be very interesting. There's a House seat up for grabs as well. Republican Lee Fletcher and Democrat Rodney Alexander. We'll get you up to date on that one. So why are they still at it in December? Well, in Louisiana, the general election is an open primary. You have to get 50% of the votes to win outright. These candidates did not. So now on a night when Tiger fans had hoped the Bayou Bengals would be on the road in Atlanta, instead, the only game in town is this one. It's the Louisiana showdown, and it's almost all over but the counting. Now the keys to victory, and for that we turn to the Fox All-Stars.
I'm Fred Barnes. My key to victory is the Bush factor. The president's campaigning was critical in the Republican capture of the Senate on November 5th, and now he wants to build on that triumph. His strategy, appear twice in North Louisiana to stir a large Republican turnout for Susie Terrell, and once in New Orleans to cut into the Democratic vote for Mary Landrieu. It just may work.
I'm Mort Kondracki. My key to victory, African-American turnout. Blacks represent 29% of Louisiana's registered voters. Mary Landrieu is overwhelmingly favored by blacks, but they need to make up at least 26% of those voting in order for her to offset Susie Terrell's advantage among whites. And Landrieu has had trouble in the past with black leaders.
I'm Michael Barone. My key to victory is Catholic voters. New Orleans Creoles and Bayou Cajuns, who, unlike Catholics in many other states, are strongly anti-abortion. Republican Suzanne Terrell charges that Democrat Mary Landrieu is not. And we'll see when the returns come in from suburban New Orleans and Cajun country what Catholic voters say tonight.
And we're expecting returns any minute now. The early numbers from some of the parishes to come in, much more from the panel as well. The polls closed just a couple of minutes ago, but anyone online at 8 o'clock Central Time still gets to vote. First numbers shortly. First time around, 8 candidates in the Senate race. Democrat Landrieu got 46% of the vote. Republican Terrell, 27%. And shortly thereafter, in the head-to-head, Landrieu had a double-digit commanding lead. That was a month ago, and tonight that's all gone. So how did Terrell's camp make it happen? Campaign Carl's covering the Republican at her headquarters at Le Méridien in New Orleans. Hello, Carl.
Hi, Shep. But one of the things they will do, as we heard there in the key points, was point to President Bush's appearance here in Louisiana. He was not alone. Vice President Dick Cheney, the soon-to-be Senate Majority Leader Trent Lott, all came here trying to help Terrell make history and oust a Democrat and return a Republican to the U.S. Senate from Louisiana. Terrell did vote today in her home city of New Orleans, where she's a former city councilwoman, now the state elections commissioner. She's been campaigning across the state for the last 48 hours by plane, by bus. It has been a blitz. After she cast her ballot, she went and had her lucky superstition chasing away lunch, and then she's taken a nap. She's here at the hotel. We expect to hear from her shortly. The polls closed, and if there's an indication from the mood here, the Terrell people very excited. They say the Republican turnout in what should be Terrell parishes has been strong and is to their liking. They even think that in some of the Landrieu areas, the Republicans believe, there are some Terrell votes to be had as well. They're so confident here, they think that this may not be a late night. They could have an early decision. The Terrell campaign very excited about their chances here tonight, Shep.
Carl, the Republican machine around here in Washington bringing out their 72-hour task force, I know. Among those, a bunch of calls from Cheney, from Barbara Bush, from Bob Dole, from Rudy Giuliani. The list goes on and on. Any word on what sort of impact that had?
Well, it certainly didn't hurt. The idea that all these people came down here drew a tremendous amount of attention to the Terrell campaign. She was running very strongly off of all the president's issues. Her opponent, the Democratic incumbent, had tried to blur some of the partisan lines, supporting the president on the war with Iraq, as well as on the president's tax cuts. And that did some potential damage to the Democratic cause and helped Terrell. There is no doubt that this is a state that has had a majority of Democratic voters. The odds are stacked against a Republican candidate, but in the wake of the midterm elections with the Republican gains, there was a tremendous amount of attention and money spent here. The Republican Party, the White House, across the country, all eyes here. They want to build on that 51-seat majority, and they are only a few minutes away from the first returns that'll tell them whether or not they're on the way to do it or not, Shep.
Well, hopefully those are minutes away, Carl. He mentioned money. $6 million by the Republicans, it's reported. $5 million by the Democrats, it's reported. Enormous amounts of money and a lot of mud bought through that. We'll get to that in a minute. First, the incumbent in this race held elected office in Louisiana since she was 23 years old. Mary Landrieu, elected to the state legislature in 1979. Her father, Moon Landrieu, a two-term mayor of New Orleans and President Carter's HUD secretary for a short time. She was out campaigning for the old man at the age of 5, a veteran politician now at age 47, and in a difficult position this time around. Her party's decided they need to create some separation from the president, who's very popular in Louisiana, so she's straddling between energizing the base and attracting the moderates, and in that area in between, her commanding lead has disappeared, but tonight there is excitement at her headquarters at the Fairmont Hotel in New Orleans. Let's go to Fox News correspondent Major Garrett, who's there covering the Democrat. Hello, Major.
Hello, Shepard. This is the Fairmont Hotel, a couple of blocks from the French Quarter, where, if you're so inclined, you can buy a lucky charm, a talisman, something to give you good luck. Well, this hotel has been a good luck charm for Mary Landrieu. Every time she's had an election night party here, she has won. The one night she did in 1995 when she ran for governor, she lost. Well, she knows and her campaign knows she's going to lead a lot of luck tonight because she, though the incumbent, is also the underdog. And she looked like it all day today. She voted early in New Orleans, and after that, she went on a frenetic drive to get votes here in New Orleans, her base. She went to a Winn-Dixie, a couple of Walmarts, a Home Depot. She also went to a luncheon place. She also went to a shopping mall, a McDonald's, anywhere she could find voters. Up until 8 o'clock tonight when the polls closed here, she was out canvassing for voters. I spoke to her just a while ago, and you could begin to hear in the senator's voice some seeds of doubt about tonight's outcome. Here's what she said.
I think we're going to be victorious tonight, but if we're not, the ideas that we have spoken about justice and equality and opportunity and building up a community and not tearing it down will survive past my career.
We think we'll be victorious, but if we're not, beginning to see some seeds of doubt, Shepard. And some Democrats I've talked to said, look, Mary Landrieu should have won this election the first time around on November 5th. She should not have had to force herself into a runoff. She could have done things differently, responded more aggressively to some of the early Terrell attacks. I asked Senator Landrieu about that as well, and she also says, looking back, she could have run a better campaign. Here's what she said.
There's some minor things that I could have done, but you know, you can always look back at the end. But what the major points are is that we ran a strong campaign. I was the only senator in the nation to have to run against 8 opponents.
Well, that's true. Many Democrats say she could have won this the first time around, needed to, and she had to expect Republicans, with all of their vast resources, would come into Louisiana with both feet after the November 5th election and win this runoff. They're hoping that doesn't happen, but there is a sense here that it may have slipped away. Shep, back to you.
Major Garrett live at the Fairmont Hotel, where Huey Long started it all in 1928. A group of farmers and workers brought them all together and began to write the history of Louisiana politics, and it will be written again tonight. Some of the first numbers have just come in to our election desk, and let's take a look at those as you decide 2002. These are very early numbers. You can see only about 12,000 people voting so far, 60% so far for Terrell, 40% for Landrieu, 0 precincts reporting. Across the 76 parishes there in Louisiana, the numbers are still very low, but they'll start to flood in shortly, and we'll bring them to you. Louisiana politics. From Huey Long's promise that he couldn't lose unless they found him in bed with a dead woman or a live boy, to former Governor Edwin Edwards, who may well be watching us from prison right now. Politics with corruption and controversy and loads of colorful characters. Tonight's numbers, plus a trip through the history books as You Decide 2002 coverage continues from the Network America Trust for news fair and balanced. The numbers are early and they are few. 0% of precincts reporting, but about 13,000 ballots are now in the books. 60% to 40% Terrell to Landrieu, but those numbers will change throughout the night. Attention to politics in Louisiana has a rich history. It's been a spotlight state for years, not always for the reasons so many politicians might like. Oh, they've kept it lively and interesting, but with it has come bribery, corruption, racketeering, and so much more.
Talk about peculiar politics. Few people outside the state even understand it. Louisiana politics, as spicy as its gumbo, with a long history of colorful characters, creeping corruption, and powerful governors. The granddaddy of them all, Huey Long, in the mansion in Baton Rouge from 28 to 32, then elected to the Senate. In the Bayou State, they call him Kingfish. One of the most powerful bosses in all the nation, never hesitating to use bribery, intimidation, even physical violence to dominate the legislature. Later, he became known for his flamboyant speeches on the Senate floor. The days of Long and his protégés helped define what has become characteristic of the state's politics: tolerance of corruption, taste for colorful extremists, and personality over party. It's a diverse state where characters dominate. Here, politics reflects life in Louisiana, or so says political analyst and Bayou native Ron Fauché.
And I think the diversity of ethnic culture in the state is a gumbo in the sense of putting a lot of ingredients together and then needing strong public figures who can build these coalitions around themselves, not around political parties. And that was the tradition in the state.
That may help explain the rise and fall of unlikely politicians, including Governor Edwin Edwards, a four-termer, and David Duke, a one-time Ku Klux Klan leader and state legislator. Edwards oversaw the creation of a new state constitution, protecting civil rights and streamlining government bureaucracy. In his third term, indicted. Mail fraud, obstruction of justice, and public bribery. Duke lost to Edwards in a runoff for governor back in '91. He's perhaps one of the most controversial characters ever to emerge from Louisiana politics. He's a former Grand Wizard of the KKK, a man who openly advocates neo-Nazi ideas. Strong, controversial personalities. They've been a thread throughout Louisiana's history. But now, the political tide may be turning.
Well, I think what we've seen in Louisiana in the last 10 or 12 years is less colorful, less dominant personality-based politics, and politics that's more nationalized in the sense that people are voting on candidates for members of Congress, for the U.S. Senate, for governor, for state office, more in terms of a nationalized sense of looking at party and philosophy over and above the strength of some of the individual personalities.
Fauché says while the trend toward aligning more with the national parties may strip some of the color from its politics and political figures, the idiosyncrasies of Louisiana's political system and its people will continue to flavor its history.
Well, with us now from Fox Station WVUE in New Orleans, a man who knows where all the skeletons are in Louisiana, political analyst Clancy DuBose. Good to see you. Thanks so much for coming.
Glad to be here, Shepard.
It's been certainly an interesting study in contrasting styles. Here you have Susie Terrell with all the backing of the party, the president and the vice president, the former president, all the first ladies, the big governors, the mayor, the former mayor of New York, all of them working for her, and then Mary Landrieu, the incumbent, almost by herself on the motorhome on the Louisiana First Express. It's been interesting to watch, your sense of how it worked.
Well, as my old friend Ron Fauché pointed out, we do have kind of a no-party system in Louisiana. It's more a question of a cult of personalities. And so national political figures, at least on the Democratic side, would not have been any help to Mary Landrieu. And I think it's one of the wise decisions that her campaign made in the runoff not to bring them down. Susie Terrell, on the other hand, gets the benefit because all of the Republican leaders right now, nationally, are very popular in Louisiana.
Landrieu, at one point, long before the primary there in Louisiana, was one to say that she's 100% supporter or something like that of the president. Now she's been forced to try and find some ways to separate, and it looks like some of the lead has gone away with it.
Well, Landrieu, I think in the primary said that she was around 74% of her votes on issues concerning the president. She voted with the president 74% of the time. I think she made a strategic error in the primary by wrapping herself around the president so tightly. I think she began to alienate some of her black supporters who were wondering what's the difference between Mary Landrieu and a Republican if this is all about who loves George Bush the most.
Many have said that one of the keys to this is getting out the African-American vote, the base in the state of Louisiana and across what used to be the solid South. Was she successful in any way?
Oh, I think we're seeing that right now. Early reports that I've had from the New Orleans area only show black turnout roughly on par with white turnout. But as you get outside the city, that's where you historically begin to see what we call a differential, a drop-off and a percentage difference between black turnout and white turnout. And if that differential gets to be too large, then Landrieu cannot win.
We're getting some new numbers in. I want to show those to our viewers. Very early, the percentage of parishes and precincts reporting here in the early going is just 4%, but it's 55% for Terrell right now, 45% for Landrieu. The most recent polls from the Times-Picayune and a UNO poll and the rest have suggested this is a statistical dead heat. Do you think this could be a long night?
I think it could, but I hope it's not. I've got a good party to get to. This is New Orleans, after all.
You know, you talk so much about the way this race has gone forward, traditional Louisiana politics. Has this been a traditional race, like ones we might have seen when she first ran back when President Clinton was on the ticket?
Yes, I think in many ways this was a classic Louisiana race, not just because it's very close statewide between a Democrat and a Republican. Louisiana, like many other states, tends to pull out all the stops. There was a lot of negative campaigning or attack ads on the Republican side at Mary Landrieu, but that's really what they needed to do. Suzanne Terrell was not well known, even though she was the highest ranking Republican female in the state of Louisiana. She has only had that distinction for the last roughly 2 years, so 3 years. So she's had to still get herself known across the state. And so it was understandable that the Republicans would come in on the attack.
Yeah.
What I personally did not understand is Landrieu's failure to return fire in the primary.
Sure.
I think that's what might cost her seat.
I'm out of time. I got to go. We're right back with much more coverage from the Louisiana election coming up. Closed for 23 minutes, 4% of the precincts reporting. There's a long road ahead just yet. With me here in studio is Fox News contributor Michael Barone of U.S. News and World Report. Michael, good to see you.
Nice to be with you, Shepard.
The dilemma here is an interesting one, and I guess one we're going to be looking at for a long time. This is a woman who ran, Mary Landrieu, the incumbent, who ran trying to figure out where to place herself. She was with the president for the primary, and now she's had to distance herself in some way.
Well, this is the dilemma the Democrats face in virtually every state in the South, possible exception of Florida. Do you energize your base, which is African-American voters who tend to vote 90% for the Democrats, and try to spur turnout and go with issue positions that appeal to them? Or do you try to go for that center vote? Do you try to go and talk about you're a moderate and you support George W. Bush on many issues and that sort of thing? And there's no clearly correct answer just from a political, tactical point of view. And the Republicans in this state have come out very strong against Mary Landrieu. They did it even before the November 5th election with ads by the National Republican Senate Campaign Committee that were just, you know, there's something about Mary, they said, and they attacked her as the most liberal senator Louisiana ever had.
Really an unfair label.
Well, Mary is her name, but the
you look to the left and to the right of that state, over in Texas, in Georgia, obviously solid in Mississippi, all across the South. The same sort of campaign strategy seemed to have worked this time around, and the Republicans have employed it once again down there. They've brought out their 72-hour task force in the last hours and expected to make a big push. And the key has been attack, and use the issues of you weren't with the president on Homeland Security.
Well, that's right. They used that with great effect against Senator Max Cleland in Georgia, and they pumped out a lot of votes in those edge of the metropolitan area counties that have been growing so rapidly. This is a long-range process. They put on registration drives there going months before. So you have a place like Forsyth County, Georgia, which on November 5th, the vote was up 40% from 1998. And the vote was 77% for the Republican Saxby Chambliss. So that counterbalances a lot of those central city votes from African-American voters in central Atlanta and DeKalb County. And in Louisiana, the place to look for that is St. Tammany Parish. That's outside of New Orleans, across the Pontchartrain River, Lake Pontchartrain Causeway, around Covington, Louisiana, in Livingston Parish, which is directly east of Baton Rouge, of East Baton Rouge Parish. These are fast-growing areas. The initial returns that I've been able to see so far indicate that Suzanne Terrell is carrying Livingston Parish by a nearly 2-to-1 margin, and the incomplete returns in that. Mary Landrieu got 32% last time. She needs to improve 4 points to get up to that magic 50% level. Not clear if she's going to do it.
If Terrell manages to win this, is that a sign to Democrats that it's going to be tough to get votes from states south of the Mason-Dixon line? Does it, for instance, tell the Democrats, maybe we don't put John Edwards on a ticket from North Carolina, maybe the South is just not our place?
Well, that may be a problem for the Democrats, because the Republicans can send the same message to their base and to the center of the voters. There's not a conflict, because the same message sells with both groups. The Democrats have to use different messages with their base and with the centers of the votes in the South. And so the Democrats may just make the calculation, look, John Edwards, we're getting 41% of the vote in the South for House of Representatives. He can get us up to 45. It ain't enough.
Michael Barone, thanks very much. We'll get back to you as the numbers come in. The Beltway boys will add to the mix as well when we come back. We'll also be looking at more returns as they come in. We'll keep an eye as well on that House race, which is also coming out of Louisiana. It's December, and they've just finished voting. What are the long-term implications for the rest of the country for the presidential election? All that after the news from New York. The polls in the Bayou State closed for 32 minutes now, and the early numbers favor Susie Terrell, an unknown prior to the last month. 53% for Terrell and 47% for Mary Landrieu, the Democrat incumbent. Just about 10% of the precincts now reporting, and we're expecting that those numbers will go up quickly. On the House side, Fletcher, the Republican, expected to win this one in with 52%, and Alexander, the Democrat, with 48%. And in that House race, 17% of all precincts across the 64 parishes now reporting. Here now with us, live from Washington, the Beltway boys, Fred Barnes, executive editor of the Weekly Standard, and Mort Kondracki, executive editor of Roll Call. Michael Barone back with us as well, and as Britt would say, Fox News contributors all. Good to see you guys. This has been it's been a mudslinger. $11 million worth of mud thrown around here. Douglas Brinkley from the Eisenhower Center at UNO called this what was the word that he used? A demolition derby against Mary Landrieu, saying that in fact every aspect of her had been attacked. Her religion, her personality, her political record, all of it. That the Republicans came in like a steamroller.
Well, they did.
Yeah.
You know, look, when you get issues like religion and abortion, issues on which people feel very, very strongly, then you're going to have a very emotional race, and that's what this is. And certainly Susie Terrell claims that she's been threatened by Mary Landrieu after a debate, but Mary Landrieu, I think, has probably taken more of a beating.
Well, you know, Mary Landrieu, she actually said after that debate, well, I wasn't threatening, I was making a promise. I think that promise was this will be your last campaign.
Indeed. Yeah.
Well, you know, incidentally, Michael has been looking over these parish results, and you know, Mary Landrieu was doing better in some of these places than she did in the last in the November 5th election. In Evangeline Parish, for example, she got 41% last time. She seems to be running like 50, over 50%. St. James Parish, which is almost all in, she's won by almost 2-1, where she got 60% last time. If that were to hold up, you know, Mary Landrieu just might win this.
Is it fair to say that Mary Landrieu was running against the entire Republican establishment in all of the nation?
Absolutely. I mean, well, everybody was down there. Cabinet officers, Vice President Cheney, Ralph Reed came in from Georgia. He was the guy who toppled the Georgia governor in the November 5th election.
Today they're getting
the president. You know,
they're getting phone calls today, robocalls as they call them, those robotic phone calls from Cheney talking to hunters about going out and vote. Hundreds of out-of-state college kids are there. If in fact you haven't gone to the polls and they were suspecting that you should go to the polls, you'll get a knock on the door from paid folks all afternoon. This is very serious in the late going.
Well, this is very serious. This was actually set up by a really unorthodox move by Bill Frist, the chairman of the Senate Republicans Campaign Committee. He decided there were multiple Republican candidates, 3 serious Republican candidates running in this all-party primary that they have on November the 5th, and he decided to back one of the 3. I mean, standard political practice is, you know, the party chairman remains neutral. But Frist decided to go with Suzanne Terrell. He thought that she would be the strongest candidate, and he thought also that she would be the candidate who would best siphon off votes from Mary Landrieu. They're both from uptown New Orleans. They both appeal to, putatively at least, to, you know, female suburban voters in New Orleans. And so that strategy seemed to pay off. Before they did that, it looked like Mary Landrieu was going to get 50% on November 5th, and if she had, she would have been reelected right there.
Some new numbers coming in right now. They're just getting updated. A few more parishes are now reporting up to about 16% of all precincts, and it's tightened up. These numbers can be deceiving, though, because though we know where some of them are coming from, we don't know exactly. And early on, the number's 51-49. We knew it was going to be close. It is going to be close.
And we may be here a while. You know, Mike referred to something earlier, and that is a problem that Southern Democrats have in running for federal races. They can't bring in their party leaders because they're too liberal for their states.
Well, Jesse Jackson came in, and she separated herself.
Exactly. And Bill Clinton came in to appeal to some black voters, and Mary Landrieu couldn't show up even to see Bill Clinton, who won Louisiana twice when he was running for president. So it's a situation where Susie Terrell can have every Republican you've ever heard of come and campaign for her, and Mary Landrieu's on her own.
Well, one of the arguments that was being made was by Jennifer Duffy from the Cook Political Report, which is that D.C. newsletter here, who says, look, the people who vote in a December election are people who are into politics. They've already made up their minds. They're clear about the issues, and they're clear about the candidates. The ones who can be swayed are the people in the poorer neighborhoods. For instance, in Louisiana, a large percentage of people in black neighborhoods, in the poor neighborhoods, they don't have phones. And down in Louisiana today, the Congressional Black Caucus, the Louisiana Federation of Teachers, trade union officials targeting Clinton precincts, going door to door on this last day saying, have you voted? If not, let me give you a ride right now.
You know, it's old-fashioned Chicago-style politics of door to door. I mean, it took, the Republicans figured, the Republicans went into the 2000 election thinking that they were going to get something like 51% of the vote on Election Day and ended up with 49. And, you know, it was a tie. They did much less well. They spent $1 million figuring out how to get out the vote. And they figured out, it took them $1 million to figure out that knocking on doors and inviting people to go to the polls works. And it was done profoundly well in the November 5th election, best of all in Georgia with Ralph Reed. And they're doing it again in Louisiana. As you pointed out, the 72-hour strategy, but the Democrats know how to do it too.
Listen, speaking of know how to do it, listen to this advertisement. This is not Bill Clinton on this tape. This is someone who sounds like Bill Clinton, and this is a campaign ad. Listen.
Hi, remember me? Bubba here. You know, I miss Washington, but there's a woman in the Senate I can always count on. My Washington and Hollywood friends think she's great. Hillary? Heck no. I'm talking about Mary Landrieu. Mary Landrieu voted over 120 times for higher taxes. She even voted to keep the Clinton tax on Social Security benefits, one of my personal favorites. And Mary Landrieu voted for taxpayer-funded abortions, needles for drug addicts, and to close vital military bases. And I guess it's obvious why all my Hollywood friends just love Mary. You know, Mary Landrieu is so liberal, she might be closer to Hillary than I am. And I'd never get along with her opponent, Susie Terrell. She's tough. As Commissioner of Elections, Susie cleaned up corruption and saved taxpayers' money. And because Susie Terrell has conservative Louisiana values, you know she'd never fit in up in Washington like Mary Landrieu has.
Paid for by Terrell for Senate campaign.
Boy, I hope Susie Terrell never gets to the U.S. Senate. She'd ruin all the fun.
It got funny and ugly, and that was rife with inaccuracies, or at least partial ones.
I talked to John Breaux today, the other senator from Louisiana. He said that there were ads running over this past week showing Breaux and Terrell together as though they were a team. And Breaux's a Democrat, obviously, and Terrell's a Republican, and he thought it was dirty pool.
All right,
wait a minute.
I got to show the boards, and we got to hit a commercial break because we got new numbers coming in. Take a look at your television set there at home, and would you look at that? 50-50 across the Bayou State tonight. This one is close, with 16% of all precincts reporting across the 64 parishes in Louisiana. A new senator will be elected tonight. We'll take you back to New Orleans for a live report from both campaigns. We'll speak to our panel and try to sort out some truth from fiction in all these campaign ads. That's As You Decide 2002 from the network America Trust for News, Fair and Balanced. And the numbers are going up and quickly. 24% of all precincts reporting across Louisiana. Susie Terrell, the Republican, with 51% of the vote. Mary Landrieu, the Democrat incumbent, with 49%. Too close to call still. Let's go back to the Bayou State. First, let's go to Major Garrett, who is at Landrieu headquarters right now. Major, what's the mood there?
Well, the crowd is somewhat sparse, Shepard, and I would say the mood right now is subdued. I've talked to a lot of Landrieu campaign staff, and they said, look, the whole essence for our day was it started off poorly. The early results from parishes around the state where they were core Landrieu supporters, people were not getting to the polls. And Mary Landrieu spent a good deal of time today on her cell phone calling her statewide campaign organizers saying, get that vote out. We need a last-minute surge. What are you guys doing? Why aren't we getting people to the polls? And about afternoon, 2 or 3 or 4 o'clock, they began to get reports back from a lot of key precincts that things were picking up. And the hope here is that it picked up just enough to put her over the top. But this campaign, I must tell you, did not start off well this morning. Mary Landrieu knew that, got on her phone, got all of her campaign staff on their cell phones, burning up the batteries to try to get these precincts to report and get their folks there. They worked on it. They feel better about it than they did earlier this morning, but they still are very much in a cross your fingers sort of mood.
Major, been reading from the Advocate out of Baton Rouge and from the Times-Picayune there in New Orleans that one of the things they were going to try to do in the late going was to get out this message of vote before you go out hunting today, because we're in the middle of hunting season. And secondly, maybe even more importantly, targeting those Clinton precincts, which went very heavily Clinton, which Landrieu did very well in back when she was running at the same time as Clinton. Do they have anything back from there?
Not yet, and all the campaign staff is up in the suite with Senator Landrieu, who's also with Senator John Breaux, the Democrat from Louisiana, who we hope to have an interview live here on Fox News very shortly. They're all up there now, all the campaign staff sequestered. But when I talked to them a little while ago, I'd say about an hour ago, they were feeling better about some of the Clinton precincts. They were feeling very good about Orleans Parish. They ought to, for goodness sake. That's Mary Landrieu's home base. They're also looking for results from Baton Rouge and up in Shreveport. They got very good reports as the day wore on from the black precincts in Shreveport. That was giving them some of the confidence that they've sort of been nursing here as election results have come in. And we saw Terrell jumped out to an early lead, but the gap has narrowed. Everyone here expects a very, very late night. Shep.
All right, Major Garrett at headquarters there. Major, thanks very much. Campaign Carl is at Terrell headquarters right now, and I've just been told that he is upstairs at the headquarters there and interviewing her. So we're expecting to have that tape into us in just a moment. But first, I want to go back to the panel. Do you guys see this as a continuation of the Republican mandate and a sort of way for the Democrats to stop the bleeding, or is it something less than that?
Well, I mean, look, this November 5th was the President's Day, as Fred said in his key to victory. The President scored a great victory on November 5th, especially in the South, you know. Now, the President was down there, made three appearances. One would expect that the momentum would continue, and Terrell came from way behind and surged to a tie. And some of the people Democrats in Louisiana thought that the momentum was emphatically on Terrell's side and were kind of discouraged by it.
Well, Democrats are going to, if in fact if the Democrat wins here, they're going to want to say this is an enormous defeat for the president. After all, everybody in his family, everybody in the party's been down there campaigning.
Well, I think they'll be able to say, look, we found at least something of a template. by which a Democrat can win in the South and somehow differentiate themselves from the National Party. So, you know, some of our other people that we're looking at in 2004, Blanche Lincoln, senator from Arkansas, that they can survive. That's what they'll say if she wins. Now, basically, you know, this is Mary Landrieu got 46% of the vote on November 5th. Al Gore got 45% of the vote in this state in the year 2000. So while it is a Republican state, they don't have to the Democrats don't have to gain too many votes to win.
One of the few states in the South, if not the only one, where there are more registered Democrats than Republicans, even in 2002. New numbers just in. More precincts now reporting in Louisiana as they work to elect a senator from the Bayou State, up to 25% now, and it's 51 to 49 in favor of the Republican. We'll hear from Carl Cameron and his interview with Susie Terrell in just a moment, and talk about more about what this means for a mandate and for the campaign in 2004. What does this tell the two parties about the South as we move toward that? All of that when we come back. It's good to have you with us.
3, 2. Thanks, Shepard. Well, we're here with the Republican challenger, Suzanne Hike Terrell. And it looks as though this has the potential to be a history-making, strong turnout night for you. How do you feel?
Well, I hope so, but I think it's going to be a long night. I think it's going to be a long night, you know, but I did make history in '99 as the first Republican woman elected statewide office, and if this happens, I'll be not only the first Republican senator, but the first Republican woman elected senator in Louisiana.
The president obviously put a lot of his political prestige on the line for you. How important was it?
Well, I think we had been gaining momentum since the primary, and we could feel the shift, and I think that what he helped us do is energize the base and to get people who actually believe in the president, his agenda, and the direction he wants to make this country go, made them understand how important it was to have the vote in the Senate. So I hope that we can get there and serve the people of Louisiana well.
Following the primary, it was fairly evident that you had some problems bringing the Republican Party together. Did the president do that for you, and what was the state of the evolution of unity for the GOP?
Well, I think that, you know, of course, because there were more, you know, there were numerous Republicans in the race, that it took a few days, but once everybody came together and the I guess the disappointments for other candidates and people understood the greater mission, that I think what the president did was when he spoke to Republicans and Democrats and independents across the state who had voted for him in 2000, because he carried Louisiana by a great margin, they realized how important it was, and they became energized. And I think that's what, at least in the early reports that we've been getting, is that there's been a tremendous turnout in this race and in parishes and in precincts that were strongholds for the president in 2000.
In the last 32 days of this runoff, it's gotten particularly testy with you and Ms. Landrieu. And some say it's partly because, well, it's two women from New Orleans and they're a lot of the same on a lot of issues. Is that a fair characterization?
I don't think so. I think that we're two women that are both fairly competitive, I think is what it is. And both two women who have made some marks in some strides where really women had not gone before. Her on the Democratic side, me on the Republican side. So I think that was probably what it was.
Suzanne Hike Terrell, good luck.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll stay in touch.
Shep, we'll send it back to you up there in the studio.
All right, Carl, thanks very much. We'll get back to him live in just a minute. We've been showing you the results as they came in, about 52 to 48 right now. The newcomer to the incumbent, more precincts in, actually now, 44% of them all, 52% to 48% seems to be holding, at least for now, and it's close. But the key here is, where are these coming from, and how do they compare with Mary Landrieu's numbers from the primary? And Michael Barone has some of those numbers because he's a digit geek, clearly.
Well, I'm just taking a look with my little calculator here at some of these numbers.
She's doing better in some of them.
That's right. In some of the rural parishes, Shep, we basically see that Evangeline Parish in Cajun country, Landrieu got not 41% in November with nearly complete returns. She's got 51% coming in now, being reported. In Morehouse Parish in the northern part of the state, home district of one of her primary opponents, Congressman John Cooksey. She improved from 38 to 51. That's a big change, with 29 out of 32 precincts in. St. John the Baptist, in that Petroleum Alley along the Mississippi River, heavily Democratic area, she went up from 52 to 59. Those are gains which, if sustained in every parish, would result in Mary Landrieu winning re-election to the Senate. A little more caution when you look at the one sort of metropolitan area parish that's mostly in. Livingston Parish, with 52 of the 53 precincts in, 36% for Mary Landrieu. Now it was 32% in the primary. If she improves 4% across the state in every parish, we've got a 50-50 race on our hands and maybe 36 days to think about who won.
I don't have enough no-dos, but I will tell you this. We're getting sort of bogged down in it, but the truth of the matter is, at 52 to 48, an hour after the polls close in Louisiana, a Republican is leading in a Senate race. Whoever would have thought that was possible?
Well, against a Democratic incumbent.
I mean, that hasn't happened since before Strom Thurmond was alive.
Since Fluff was a kitten. We got to hit a commercial break. More on the Louisiana Showdown in just a minute. We'll get our numbers updated, and we're not going to bed till this thing's decided, I've been told. Stay with us. And those are the numbers 1 hour after the polls closed in Louisiana. Oh, my. Look at that. 50-50. Landrieu and Terrell, just about 50% of all precincts reporting its 50s across the board. And how about on the House side? Yeah. Looks a little bit familiar, doesn't it? 50s all over the House. I mean, they've been saying it all day, but I was kind of hoping we might have something done by now.
Well, one thing you have to remember in this race is that this is a Democratic incumbent who a reasonably unknown Republican is a 50-50 with. Now, a lot of assets that Republicans have been sent in from Washington to help Susie Terrell, but it's amazing, I think, that she is doing as well as she is against an incumbent who was not unpopular in Louisiana and has a great name in that state. The Landrieu name is one that's known by everyone, her father having been mayor of New Orleans. So I don't think this shows that the Republican momentum is, even if Landrieu winds up winning narrowly, it is particularly over, particularly in the South.
No, I don't buy that at all. Look, the Republican Party had a wave from November 5th. The president was there. The vice president was there. They threw everything they had at it. And if they can't beat Mary Landrieu, who only won the last time, she was up by 5,000 votes. You know, she's been, and this is the South, which is increasingly Republican, trending. The one big thing that Mary Landrieu has going for her is John Breaux, who is probably who is the most popular politician in Louisiana, and they've been practically joined at the hip for weeks going around the state.
Mort, Fred, Michael, we are out of time. We'll come back, though. We're going to keep Major and Carl down in Louisiana. We'll get you updated on these numbers. The moment we can call it, we will. The next and last Senate seat is up for grabs. Rita Cosby and the Foxwire coming up live from New York. When there's something important to tell, we'll come back live to Washington. For now, I'm Shepard Smith. Thanks for trusting us for your news and information.
Not give a rubber stamp to the president, that if Susie Terrell came in there, she was going to, you know, just do anything that the president wanted. And sugar was a big issue in this state. Now, it'd be interesting to know whether the sugar-growing parishes are significantly in Landrieu's favor.
The timing on it was very interesting, because the day that President Bush was down in New Orleans for the first time, I believe it was Tuesday of last week, campaigning for Susie Terrell, this came out in a Mexican newspaper. The word immediately spread, and Susie Terrell did not say anything to the president about it publicly. And Mary Landrieu jumped right up and said, see, you're rubber stamping with the president. This is good for Louisiana. But the Terrell camp insisted that behind the scenes, he talked to the president not once but twice, that this decision hasn't been made by the White House yet. Yet another sort of possible decision.
Well, Shep, I think one of the things is that this looks to be increasingly like, particularly if it seems likely now Mary Landrieu wins, it's like an off-year election. Because the way that the Republicans originally had set this up, they figured that the Louisiana race might determine who had a majority of votes in the Senate. As it turns out, it doesn't determine that. So if you're a Louisiana voter who's concerned about local issues, whether it's sugar, and there's not that many voters concerned about sugar, but it's, you know, it's a litany that everybody knows, and they make a lot of noise about it. But you still want the Republicans to control the Senate. And you still want Bush to have support. You can vote for Mary Landrieu, secure in the confidence that the Republicans will still have a majority in the Senate. even if you vote for Mary Landrieu. That was not the case if this election had been held on November the 5th.
Landrieu's a name everybody in New Orleans has known forever.
And most of the state, too. Look, here's what's important, I think, and I think it was Carl Cameron said it, that the turnout would be 45%. That means that the Democrats got their vote out. Republicans were hoping for a smaller turnout, 40%, 39%. I don't think the sugar issue matters much. I've been to the sugar growing areas there. They're rural areas, not many voters, probably doesn't matter. And I've never thought voters were strategic voters thinking, well, I can vote Democratic now because Republicans hold the Senate. They voted for, I don't think there are too many strategic voters.
The question is, do you vote for Louisiana interests or do you vote for national interests? The president is coming down there basically saying, you know, help me out in Washington, D.C. Mary Landrieu is saying, wait a minute, we need an independent voice. That was her final kicker of the campaign. And it looks like she persuaded some people. Furthermore, just one more thing. The sugar issue appeals to sort of white working class voters who and you can expand it beyond just the places that sugar gets grown. It's also an issue of it's a way to get some whites to vote for you.
Well, there was a local issue that played a part in the one close race, Senate race, that the Republicans lost on November 5th in South Dakota, where they lost by 524 votes or so, the official count runs. And that was whether you should have drought, what form drought assistance should take for farmers in South Dakota. And in that case, the White House held out against a position that Tom Daschle and Tim Johnson and the Democrats wanted, and it undercut the argument that the Republican John Thune made of, you know, I can get in with the president and do things for South Dakota. Eventually, the president came out for something, but it was a problem for Thune, and of course, when you lose by 524 votes, any problem caused a loss.
I don't want to get ahead of ourselves because our election team our election desk is watching these numbers very carefully. We have 90% of the precincts reporting, and this thing is too close to call. We do not know who's going to win this race. We may know in 15 minutes or 30 minutes, but we don't know now. But either way, can't you make the argument that Susie Terrell was a woman who got 27% of the vote, who was a virtual unknown, campaigning against a political legend of a family, a man who had been the mayor of New Orleans for 2 terms, HUD secretary under President Carter, whose name has been known in that state for a long time. And if you ask people across Louisiana, and I've read 1,000 papers, and they say she comes from good folks, it's a name people knew. To get that many numbers in this short a time was a pretty impressive accomplishment.
Well, Republicans put a major effort in there, but in the end, it's something that Karl Rove of the White House told me, that the political advisor there, their worry was that it was a lot easier to get from 46%, which Mary Landrieu had in the primary, to 51% than it was to get from the 27% that Susie Terrell had to 51%. Now, it looks like Susie Terrell came close, but maybe just didn't quite get there.
Now, let's look at another argument. There was this argument that the South, which was solid for Democrats way back when, now was the solid South and was going to go all Republicans. That, in fact, this national security issue, which is so important with Louisiana, with its heavy concentration of military and all the rest, that this national security issue was going to be able to ride the wave, and it's possible now that it didn't happen. Does that tell the Democrats that there's room in the South?
Well, there's a little bit of room in the South. I mean, you take a big sweep in a national election. Look, the South is trending Republican. I think this is what Michael says, a kind of an off-year election where people are saying we'll vote for some independence on the part of our representative. And furthermore, don't forget about John Breaux. I mean, John Breaux is a powerhouse in Louisiana, and he campaigned his can off for Mary Landrieu.
Yeah, it is good if Mary Landrieu wins tonight, as seems likely. That's good news for Blanche Lincoln of Arkansas and Senator Fritz Hollings of South Carolina. It says that you can use local advantage and local issues to do so. But I think we do have to keep in mind the off-year context of this election. It's easier to vote, to cast your vote for a candidate of a Democratic Party for many of the moderate voters in this situation when you're secure in the confidence that you're not going to turn the Senate over to the National Democratic Party. In 2004, presumably, party control will be at stake in the election in November.
There were a number of people who said at the end that this 72-hour task force, which the Republicans had implemented in the rest of these states, Georgia, Texas, so many of them, that had worked so brilliantly in the last days of the last election, couldn't work here because this is December, and voters in December are politically savvy. They have their ideas made up already. And the last 72 hours are not going to make a difference. The last 72 hours, we've seen almost no change in numbers.
Well, we haven't seen much change in numbers, but I think, you know, remember, we haven't quite seen all the numbers yet.
True.
And in the returns that I've got off the website here, and they may have been superseded a little by in the totals that we see on the screen, we have none of the 261 precincts in Jefferson Parish came out. That's a parish in which 59% of the voters did not vote for Mary Landrieu, the Democrat, on November 5th.
And I want you to know this, too, as the birdie in my ear is telling me. Our decision team is concerned because the AP's numbers are one thing, and the Secretary of State's numbers are another thing.
And we've also
this is starting to sound just a little bit familiar.
We've also got St. Tammany Parish. We've got only 22 of the 131 precincts in St. Tammany Parish. And that parish across Lake Pontchartrain, across the causeway from New Orleans, Mary Landrieu only got 30% of the votes in November 5th.
Updated numbers just coming in, and these are the official numbers from the Secretary of State's office, correct? These are Associated Press numbers, which differ only slightly from the Secretary of State's numbers. Will we sort that out? You bet we will. Can we do that at this moment? The answer is no. But the lead, at least for this moment, has increased for Mary Landrieu. The problem is we don't know what's left. In a lot of states, for instance, in South Florida, the problems that we had in the year 2000, you could look at South Florida's numbers and say, well, this is Dade County. What we didn't know was what part of Dade County. The same thing is true here.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We don't know what part of New Orleans. The part of New Orleans that I've seen on the website here shows that 82% for Mary Landrieu. She got 75% on November 5th.
So you can make the argument there's 7% to go another way.
That you make the argument that she's gained 7%, or you could say that's a disproportionately African-American section of New Orleans, and therefore that there's more white areas left to report, and maybe Susie Terrell won't lose by as many votes in the other half of the precincts there.
If in fact the Democrat does win here, then we have a 59 to 48 to 1 sort of split. Is that right?
51.
That's what I meant. That's what I meant. 51 to 48 to 1.
Right.
There's not really room for another Jeffordsism.
They got to have a pair of Jeffords come across at the same time. And as you remember, Benedict Arnold acted alone.
Yeah, generally nobody wants to join the minority. Just one.
It's funny how that works, isn't it? I want to check in with our correspondents one more time because enthusiasm seems to be moving around. Let's go to Carl Cameron first. Campaign Carl. Is he first? Campaign Carl first. There he is. Carl, what's the mood there at your headquarters?
Oh, they're very optimistic. They still think that there's an opportunity for them to pull this thing out. But as some pretty insightful political observers said, they may be whistling past the graveyard here. It is still a little bit of time left. There are perhaps as many as 150, 200,000 votes out there that could still be counted. But as you look across the map, and we're seeing it all over the place in terms of the local coverage of all of this with their red and blue parishes maps sketched out across the Louisiana map, the hill is getting steeper and steeper for Susie Terrell there. There you see it, 96% of the precincts in, and it's almost a 20,000 vote margin in favor of the Democratic incumbent. Susie Terrell was hoping to make history tonight. She would have been the first Republican to actually be elected to the U.S. Senate since the Civil War Reconstruction era. It does not at this point look like that is to be. Mary Landrieu bucking the trend, an embattled Democratic incumbent, one who was early identified by Republicans as one of the most vulnerable, one that they really wanted to oust, surviving and will stay in what will soon be a Democratic minority if in fact she holds on. We got 4% of the precincts left, Shep. There are votes out there. Here at Terrell headquarters, they're hoping against hope, but time is wasting.
There are still votes out there, and though only 4% are left, that's more than 17,000 votes. Major Garrett live at Landrieu headquarters. Major, I'm guessing, well, it sounds as if people are a little bit happy there.
Confident and ecstatic would be the mood here. And I want to address this sugar issue real quick, Shep, because I'll tell you this. Landrieu campaign workers told me today, a week ago, we were out of this race. But they really believe the sugar issue galvanized a couple of things. One, that Susie Hike Terrell would be a rubber stamp for Bush. And two, it brought into sharp relief, at least in the Landrieu camp's opinion, the idea that the state was hurting economically and the Bush administration was not sufficiently, nor was Susie Hike Terrell sufficiently sensitive to that issue. Generally speaking, attacking the economy, and in specific, this whole sugar issue. And they believe it breathed real life into a Landrieu populism message late in the game, and it blunted the momentum the Terrell campaign had. And I've talked to several top officials with the Landrieu campaign who said without that issue, which essentially dropped into their lap because of this newspaper article that appeared in Mexico, without that issue, they wouldn't have been in this game. And now, not only in the game, they appear to be ahead and the victor.
Sugar seems so unimportant to many, but it sounds as if it may have turned here. Major Garrett live for us at campaign headquarters. I want to go back to the boards and show you what I described as some sort of discrepancy between Associated Press's numbers and the Secretary of State's numbers. Now we know one parish, one particular parish, Jefferson Parish, was not included in the Secretary of State's numbers. The Secretary of State in Louisiana did not yet have the Jefferson Parish numbers. We have them. The Secretary of State is about to be updated on those numbers, and when that happens, we will all be on the same page. 17,000 votes apart, more than 1.1 million ballots cast, and these numbers do include absentee ballots. So there you have it. Still too close to call, but Mary Landrieu with a slight edge. Let's get a final word around the House, starting on the end.
Well, it does look insurmountable, I think, for Susie Terrell at this point. This is a big victory for Democrats if they win the House seat as well, as it, which Republicans counted as a certainty that they were going to win.
There'll probably be a runoff there,
yeah,
but,
well,
I mean a recount. But.
Yeah, well, there usually is when it's close, but a very strong night for Democrats under the circumstances.
That interview that Carl Cameron had with Susie Terrell was most significant. I mean, she looked down, and she presumably had projections of her vote. It didn't sound good for her.
10 seconds.
Problems within the Republicans, bitterness in that congressional primary on the part of one of the losers, and problems with Susie Terrell and her primary opponents.
It's very interesting, all three of you. Thanks very much. Good of you to join us tonight. We'll have continuing coverage throughout the night. Once our election desk is able to pick a winner, which could be a while, we'll bring that to you at the news updates at top and bottom of the hour. Brand new program on Fox News Channel to come next. Cal Thomas and his new program, and his special guest tonight, the Vice President of these United States. I'm Shepard Smith in Washington. For all of us who made this broadcast possible, thanks for joining us. And thanks for trusting us for your news, fair and balanced.